right, welcome to today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader, where we dive deep on all things leader related to leading yourself and, of course, leading other people and making an impact in the world around you. I've got a great guest on today. I'm extremely excited to have Jennifer Mackin, who has been in the leadership space for the last 25 years, working with thousands of companies, and she is an absolute pro. She's also the author. She's the CEO of the Oliver Group, and she's also the author of the upcoming book hitting stands on August 25th called Leaders Deserve Better, a Leadership Development Revolution. So Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So you and I have had some great conversations recently about leadership. We're both obviously fascinated by it and spend a lot of time. And our listeners today are curious to know, more about leadership.
Yeah.
I'd love to understand a little bit about, how your leadership thinking was developed, and kind of where that came from.
Well, that goes back a far ways in terms of my background, and thinking about how were leaders in my life, how did they display leadership characteristics? I think that's really where it starts, and then fully developed as I got into the work and saw a lot of things working well and a lot of things not working well. So the leaders that I worked with, showed up pretty strong, some didn't show up very strong. And I think I learned the most from those who didn't. One example was my first job out of college working for an airline, and I was bored to tears. I really didn't know what my path was within the department or the organization. And so learning that was important after I left, knowing that if I had had some of that guidance, if I had been challenged, I would have stayed. And then contrast to that, I worked for Pfizer for a short time in New York and worked for the head of HR there and had a huge opportunity to work in diversity, and had a project where I had a lot of autonomy, resources, access to leaders within the company that I needed. And I saw this big difference of what it made for my output, so to speak, my work back to them was so much more enhanced than it was in my first job because of the person that I worked for. So I think it was shaped a lot by those experiences. I think it's shaped by, all the people that I look up to. My father being the main one that stands out about who I learned leadership principles from. It was about relationships. That was key for him. There were all kinds of other items about integrity and doing work that really matters, and the money will come next after that.
Mm-hmm.
One example I have from him that just floored me is we have been working together. Oliver Group is a family business, and he passed away suddenly in 2006. And the relationship piece really came to light when we had his visitation. And I'm telling you, John, there was a line out the door to come and give their respects. And it just really highlighted for me how much he impacted people and how important that is in our work that we do. So I'm kind of giving you just more of that background of how my development led to what I think it should be now.
Mm-hmm.
And the work that we do and how it's kind of guided some of that thinking, because I'm really love problem solving and I love figuring things out and how to do things better. And I knew along the way there was a lot of improvement that could be made in how companies develop leaders. And it's taken me a long time, but I have pulled it all together and have a unique solution.
Well, it's interesting because, and you bring up some great points that people learn. I know I did too. You see great leadership and you see bad leadership. And for you, you got two ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
You've quickly figured out what not to do and what that bad leadership might have caused or not brought out. And then you saw the other side of that. And sometimes I think most leaders learn that way just by watching. But what should leader development look like in your mind? What's kind of the ideal way that it should be, and how should leaders learn?
Yeah, I think that is the part that's been missing. because I think about leadership and the characteristics of what makes a good leader. I don't think that that's changed a whole lot. You may have insight into what's changed. I think our world is faster paced and there's more chaos and kind of craziness. But we've always needed to be strong communicators, need to manage performance well, hire people well. So I guess that hasn't changed. So for me, what makes really good leadership development within an organization is more of systemically how they manage it. So first of all, having that people development connect to the strategy so that everyone understands why are we doing this and what is this going to do for execution purposes down the line. How are we going to prepare leaders to be ready for our future? If everyone sees that link, it's going to stick much more so. I believe that also what's missing and what works is that leaders of all of the people going through this development have to be more involved. They have to help them pre getting this information of what do they need to be successful in their role, and then help them reinforce it when they are playing it out and coming back into the workplace and trying some of these new skills that they're learning. I think that we need a lot of face to face. And I know that sounds weird. We're on Zoom, we're all on Zoom, but face to face components of development where we have a opportunity to interact with our peers, learn from each other, even if it is Zoom, we're at least having a lot of exchange and not just lecture based or self learning. Or I think that's important. And lastly, reinforcement of concepts. So if the skills are similar that we learned 20 years ago, why are they still not sticking today? I think it's a lot because it's not reinforced in practice. So we're all busy. We come back and our worlds are kind of crazy, especially if we've been out and we've learned all these really cool things and we come back and they kind of go out the window more than not. So reinforcing knowledge and having that opportunity and this culture of learning is valued, developing is valued is really what separates one company doing it well versus another one.
Do
What
you
do you
see
think?
most companies, are they aware, do you think, or most business owners or CEOs, are they aware that they are lacking the right type of leader development, or is it just something they don't even realize and that they're not even aware of?
Great question, because I think it's both. I think it's all across the board of some people don't know they have an issue and others do and they don't know how to fix it. But I know that billions are spent a year on development. And I know that CEOs in several surveys I've seen recently even say leadership development, talent retention are, in their top 5 focuses. So they know it's important. They spend a lot of money already on it, and yet leaders are still ill-equipped in a lot of cases. So what's that disconnect? And I think that if they knew what to do, they would do it differently. I
Mhm.
don't think the learning professionals know what to do differently. They're doing the best they can and what they've always done. And I think the leadership teams don't know what to ask for in
Mhm.
terms of development. So yeah, I think it's an education that's required, that if they knew what to do, they would do it differently.
Right. So the intention is there. They just don't know
Yeah.
how to do it, how to deliver it. And you bring up a great point. A lot of leaders just they don't know. They might have their own blind spots. They don't know what they should be doing. Or I think a lot of leaders even take it upon themselves to try to learn how to be better leaders, to learn different concepts and principles and tactics, but the application of it is a whole different thing. I mean, we've seen leaders, and I know
Yeah.
you have too, where they might leave a whole workshop on leadership and have such great intent on building their culture different or developing their people, and they just the execution of it falls apart. They don't really
Right.
know, how to apply it.
They have great intentions. They see some of their weak spots or where they're not performing as well. But then the how do I get better at this, has to come from their boss that they work with, reinforcing it, knowing what they're wanting to work on, and practicing the new skills that they learn. But yeah, everyone comes in with great intentions, and you think, why does one leader do better than another leader? And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of reason for that. But I think companies' responsibility is to make the environment such that
Mhm.
every leader can thrive and try new things and develop and get better and better. Because nobody's ever arrived that I've ever seen. And there, you can say, oh, they've got that leadership thing down. I certainly don't. We're all learning more and more. So if it's ongoing and we can't check the box and say, okay, I'm a good leader now, or okay, we've developed our leaders now, I
Mhm.
think that's the other big challenge, is that we can't ever be finished.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
What about for the that leader that might be in an organization or working for a boss who may not be a willing participant in this in their development, and at the same point, this person really wants to develop. How do they do it? How do they do it if they don't
Right.
have their boss's engagement in that process?
I think finding others in the organization is one way, that could support their learning, or could be a value thinker with them on what it is they need. Because again, they might not know what they need. If they know what they need, and think through who could help me, who's already doing this well, that could mentor me. I think mentors are huge if we could, do much more of that. And I found that a lot of leaders are very willing to mentor others. So if you can find someone in the organization that you can talk to and really get at what makes them successful at the next level where you want to be, and then figure out where to get those skills, how to practice those, and put your own development plan together. That's what I found a lot of leaders don't do well. They might know what they need, but then coming up with a plan for it. So what are the steps in getting there? What
Mhm.
do I need from a resource standpoint to do that? I mean, it could be anything from writing skills, better communication skills, to better balance in their life, to coaching somebody else. I mean, it's always all these different things that help you be a better leader, that we're all working toward, and identifying where do you get that help,
Yeah.
recognizing you need the help first.
Well, and I think that's the big thing is everybody, egos can get in the way when you feel like, okay, well, I don't need the help, or I'm not going to seek out or ask for help because I feel like it's a sign of weakness or whatever. That's a major problem I see. And that
Mhm.
first step of just saying, hey, listen, I know I can get better, and there's tons of people that are better than me. I think everybody, I agree with you. I think everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs to be developed by somebody else. If nothing else, that person helps you see something you don't see. I mean,
For
everybody's got a
sure.
blind spot, or many
Yeah.
of them in some
Well,
cases.
and often the cultures are are such that they don't they don't give people the opportunity to say, I don't know.
Mm.
And I was thinking about one leader that I've worked with a very long time, came and started working with us, and you know never showed a vulnerability, just always got everything together, always had the answers. And over time learn that, oh, this is a place where I can question things, I can say I don't know. And so coming from a corporate environment to a consulting firm was a different environment, and it allowed him to explore and to learn and to show that he's real, um, where he wasn't able to before.
Yeah, that
um,
makes sense. And that's, that I'm sure you probably come across that with a lot of people where it's in some company cultures are like that, where they just make it feel as though that's a sign of weakness if you
yeah.
are asking questions, or even, talked about the concept where people are in an organization where they either they don't allow mistakes or failures, or risk taking that is end up being negative backlash.
Yeah,
Um,
but I think it's changing. I do think it's improving, and that companies see that the necessity of that, and how well their organizations do if they allow people to explore.
yeah.
So I'm hopeful that it's changing.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and turning to you as a leader, you have done a phenomenal job with your company, growing it 7 times, multiple since you bought it, which is a phenomenal accomplishment. What do you attribute to that?
Well, first of all, it was a small business, so it's a little easier that way. But no, seriously, I think being a family business, there's nothing more motivating than being responsible for the well-being of your family and the work that your family's built. So those lean years were quite a motivating factor. I do think because of that, it's sheer work hours. I mean, when people talk about going in their own business, I don't think they realize how it's 24/7 sometimes. So I think it's working hard, working a lot of hours, but more than that, I would say it's adjusting to what our clients needed from us and being flexible and entrepreneurial about it. So I thank my business partner Scott Kiefer a lot. We early in when after becoming president of this organization, we worked side by side when a client would say, "Can you help us with X?" And we knew we could, but it wasn't necessarily something we often do. And working together with the client to make successful outcomes or solve problems. And because we are more known for solving problems and bringing out what we see in a kind way, but helping move toward a better place for their business, that has given us great opportunity to create new services or new tools that our clients have rallied around, and then great for all of them. Lastly, I would say probably about 8 years ago, I went to a lot of different consulting firms that were growing faster than me. And this is where I say, go to leaders that are better than you, that you think are really good, or companies that are really strong. And I talked to them about what their differentiators were. And I learned two things in particular. I'm sure there were more, but the ones that stick with me is just how they handled their, which clients they worked with that were more profitable for them, and kind of shifting that for us. And they wrote a book. Often, it really is in service world and consulting world, it is all about what we know and how we can help translate that for companies and helping them be more successful. And so thought leadership was also a key, and building more of that since I've learned that and coming out with this new book. I'll tell you in another couple of years if we're able to do it again and grow that fast again.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. So, Leaders Deserve Better, a leadership development revolution. Why is that important to readers?
Well, I think my audience are those of I want all leaders to be able to read this and get something of it, but out of it. But it's really designed for leadership teams, senior leadership teams, CEOs in particular, and heads of HR. And it goes back to, they know they're spending a lot of money on development, or maybe they're not, and they don't even know what to do. It's CEO's top priority, but yet they know that they're not even measuring how they're doing. So I believe leadership teams will get a lot of value from this book to learn how they can run their organizations differently and design their development programs and processes differently, to get these really crazy, strong, different results that we're getting, and stickiness of this learning, and a culture of leadership culture that they are looking for across the board. So I'm really excited to share this approach with the world, because I think it'll change their businesses. It'll change their leaders. We say leaders deserve better. They deserve as much as we can give them to be their best, because they influence their direct reports. They influence their families, and influence communities. I mean, I could make it broader, but I just feel like there's so much more work that could be done. It could be done so much more effectively.
Yeah.
And my book outlines some of those ways.
Let me ask you, and this might be an obvious answer for you, but probably not for a lot of people. When you're talking to the CEOs or the business leaders that may not have invested heavily in leader development, and
Yeah.
may not, you got all kinds of competing items, line items, and money going all different places, may not be a full believer in what actually that type of investment does for an organization. You've worked with
Yeah.
thousands of organizations.
Yeah.
What would you tell them? Like, okay, what does it actually mean to them? What's the result of that?
Right. Well, business execution is because their people execute what they need to execute. I mean, we've got to be able to show that link of people success and business success. So when we're talking to companies, we are finding out what they care about, what they're trying to do, what's getting in the way, And it's always about people somewhere. And so it's less about saying, if you were to spend $500,000, $1 million a year on development, you're going to see X. It's more of chunking it along the way. Okay, so if you want to get into new markets and grow, your leaders are key for how to do that, and they have to work together, and they have to be strong and bringing other people along. And so it's taking all of those skill sets that our leaders need and tying it to, if they don't have it, you're not going to be able to execute. And usually they haven't been able to execute very well. They're struggling. And so we have to make that link between leaders that are strong and their execution of what they care about. That's going to be the only way they're going to spend money or time.
Mhm.
And they usually don't see another way to do it. They don't see, that we've done as much as we can operationally for efficiency, financially for efficiency. It's really down to our people. And the more we develop them, the better off our organization is going to be. So I think there is that understanding, but then we try and make it really clear for the companies we work with. I'll give you an example, because that can be very vague sounding. And one of our clients came to us and said, we have about 40% of our top leaders retiring in 5 years. And we have a pretty big gap between them and this next level of leaders that are ready to come up. And we really don't know what to do. And that's a big number. And that's a lot of intellectual information leaving. And so it took us about 2 years to help them be ready for that and get these leaders to be able to do a lot of what the ones that are exiting can do. So it just depends on what the company is looking for. They were able to get those ready. The CEO was able to retire. They hired a new CEO as a replacement. So it just depends on the company and what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
What have you seen?
That's a great question. And to that point, I think a lot of companies don't realize so that is a great example. 5 years from now, okay, there's a big problem that exists. And I think a lot of companies don't take stock in that and really assess, okay, what is this going to look like and what's this going to mean, until it's too late. You can't fast track extremely well the development of people. And I think that I think the leaders that really embrace, the companies that embrace leader development and really do invest in it, there's an unbelievable difference between them and the companies that don't. There's an unbelievable difference in their growth, their adaptability, their ability to handle complex issues and problems. And to your point, it's all about people. It's how do these people handle situations? How do they make decisions? How do they communicate? How do they hold people accountable? How do they drive ownership, a level of ownership within the organization?
Yeah.
That all just stems from people's abilities and skills.
And one of the things that we're coming out with that's part of this book is a leadership development maturity tool. And it lays out all the aspects of how an organization can be structured and set up for good leadership development. And they can assess themselves through this survey, through this tool, about where they're strong, where they're not as strong, and then collectively as a group identify the top few things that if they were to make change in how they compensate leaders, or the way that they reinforce their knowledge, or whatever it may be, connecting to the strategy a little bit deeper. This will give them specific things to identify of what's going well and keep going, keep doing, start, stop, continue, and what they want to work on ongoing. And then it gives them this congruency and alignment of their leadership team to see the impact this could have on their business. So when I say leaders don't know what they don't know, senior leaders don't know how to improve their development of their people. They just know we're supposed to do it. They probably have bought into what you're saying about, I know good companies do this well. Now we're able to give them a bit of a roadmap for how to do it. I don't know that anyone's had that before, where they have a roadmap of, okay, I'm already doing these things, but I'm not doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really excited about that. So we can come in and make that direct connection for that company.
Yeah.
and show them the value.
Well, I think that's fantastic. It's almost like going to a doctor. Somebody wants to get healthy, overall healthy, but you may be healthy in areas and not healthy in certain areas, and you
Yeah.
really need to be pretty prescriptive in what you're doing versus just being healthy is pretty vague.
Broad. Right. That's
Broad.
a great analogy.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool. It gives them an ability to zero in on exactly, and you an ability to zero in on exactly what they need and how to do it.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then where do you need help or not? You know, and that ranges quite a bit of capability internally to be able to provide leaders
Yeah.
and others, all people, what they need for their development, and
Yeah.
recognizing that is important.
So let me ask you, you work with a lot of different types of companies and a lot of different industries. Is there something, and different size companies as well, is there something that is a common theme now that you're seeing that's really a need for leaders in general?
Well, let's see. I mean, I think it's through change, managing through this change, managing remotely. All of that is different, and I think it takes a lot of the same leadership skills to do well in that environment, but it still is different, and that is across all industries. Um, I think keeping people engaged as leaders, and whoever you're responsible for, and helping them through challenges. I think more than ever that is a need for leaders that maybe we didn't need as much. And how do you hold people accountable, but yet um, care and ask about them personally and give them some of the psychological aspects of interaction that they need. So holding accountable, but yet being caring at the same time. I think those are hard. We haven't needed to do that as much in our past. So I think that's important too, that they get that. So I'm seeing some of that across industries. Healthcare in particular, they just don't have time. I mean, they're just overwhelmed, overloaded. It could go, that could be true for a lot of organizations that are really fast growth right now because they are contributing to supporting the pandemic's relief and things like that. And that's really hard for companies to say, how do we keep developing our people when they're so busy?
Mhm.
That's just a common challenge anyway for organizations to think, how do I pull my people out right now when
Yeah.
there's so much going on?
Right. And that's tough because I think now is certainly a good example, but I think every business struggles with that no matter when it is, whatever's going
Right.
on. It's how much time do we work on the business versus in it? That's a common
Yeah.
struggle I see leaders face.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, we get that all the time. And that's usually because we haven't been able to make that link between, if they learn this, then your business will be more successful.
Yeah.
Because when they see that, they're like, oh, yeah, you could get 2 weeks if you want with them. I mean, whatever it takes to get them to be able to be successful in our next acquisition or whatever it is. So I think that's really where that objection comes from, whether it's, oh, that's too expensive, or my people don't have time for this. That's similar in my mind of we haven't done our job in helping them see the value,
Right. Exactly.
which
I
is
know
hard.
you were mentioning you were doing a survey
Yeah.
about how leaders perform during the pandemic so far. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's coming out today, this afternoon. And we're sending a survey out to all of our senior HR and CEO contacts, some leadership team members, and we're asking them, how did your leaders fare during this last few months? And trying to get a sense of, where did they do well, where did they not, where's the continued need, because we all know this is going to continue, and we're going to continue to have to think differently and innovate and all of those things. So we're asking about the impact it's had on their business, but also, how did their leaders do in being transparent? So we have categories of what we think will work, or the categories in which, if leaders are successful in, they're going to do well through this pandemic. So trying to get their sense of how well are they doing or not doing. So it could be transparency, it could be asking employees for ideas, it could be being visible, be reworking your strategy, based on what's going on. So we're asking them a lot of questions about just how did it go? How's it been?
Mhm.
And where are your weak points? And so we're going to be able to share that and incorporate what we learn into our development with our clients, and give them this information so that they know where their leaders are struggling. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of it. Maybe everybody did great, and I think a lot of them are doing really well, and I also think a lot of them are struggling. So, but we
Yeah.
don't know where exactly.
Well,
So
it's new. First of all, I'm really interested to hear the results of that too. I think it's such a it's obviously an incredibly unique time, and leaders have been really stressed in different ways, as everybody has,
right,
and trying to figure out how to do business the same, better, differently, and also help manage and lead people's emotions, help them lead and manage their emotions that are really, stress and everything is at a
yeah.
all-time high. How I'd love to get your perspective on that. How does a leader deal with that when in an environment where stress is high?
Yeah.
And maybe it's a function of the business or the industry, healthcare workers certainly, or it's
Right.
just a specific time. How do leaders, what can they do in that situation?
Well, I think that it's a lot of how they take care of themselves, because I've seen our worst selves, I think, come out when we're tired and stressed ourselves. We can't help others who are stressed and tired and overwhelmed. Um, so I think that's key, is to be able to recognize when you're in that place and remove yourself so that you show up really strong for people.
Mhm.
And I think sharing what you know, asking people how they're doing, allow them an opportunity to talk. I think leaders could do more of that with their teams, whether it's around fairness right now and the riots and protests and things going on. People want to talk about this with each other. And I
Mhm.
think we've never really blurred the lines as businesses with the personal side. And that's what I would recommend to leaders to think about, is how can you do that in an authentic way so that people feel like you care, and they're having an outlet for talking about it.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of loneliness, I think. I don't know if you're seeing that, but a lot of people are feeling they love it on one hand, productive, and yet on the other hand, um, lonely, and the relationships are harder. There's just a lot of challenges with it. So I think we've got to figure out what each individual needs. So we recommend a lot of one-on-ones with each of your direct reports, just to ask how they're doing. Not your typical one-on-ones, what's going on, what can I help with, how do we move these things forward, but just, hey, how you doing, what's going on with your family, how are you feeling, all of that stuff is just more important than ever.
Yeah, it really is, and that's so important for people to understand. I think leaders forget that, and communication in general needs to go up 10 times at
And it's
least.
always the number one challenge when you see engagement surveys, is communication. And it's always been that way. It's just always a challenge, because we all have different needs when it comes to how we want and need people to communicate with us. And that's the same with working remote or dealing with stress. We use a lot of behavioral assessment tools with our clients and personally, so that we can learn about what their motivators are, what they're driven by, what their needs are, because some people may have love that they're able to work alone and they can focus on all of that, and others just really need this collaboration. And so if we can uncover what each individual needs and try and meet those needs by treating them differently and not just giving them what we would want
Mhm.
as leaders. And so I think really learning about the behavioral side um, is key for a leader to be able to reach every single person that reports to them in a way that's most productive and helpful.
Yeah, it's adaptability and leadership flexibility, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And some people are saying, "Gosh, we don't." I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard, we just don't know what's going to happen next. And
Mhm.
we're on this roller coaster, and we think, oh, maybe it's getting better, and we can start forecasting, and then nope, something
Right.
something else takes our feet out from under us.
Yeah.
So I think those who are naturally flexible, naturally adaptable, naturally think of innovative new ways of doing things, those are going to be the leaders that succeed the most,
Yeah.
because they're not fearful of what they may be worried. I mean, we're all worried a bit about what's coming, and we don't like that we don't have control over it. But but to be able to take information in, and I think this is a cognitive thing too, to be able to take information in of all these things that are happening around us, make sense of it, and then come up with a direction. So I see either people are just working in a bubble, like nothing's happening, I'm going to do the same thing I've always done, or they're overwhelmed and they don't do anything at all because it all seems chaotic. But the ones that really succeed take all the information in, think about it differently, come up with some new ways, and
Mhm.
then plan it out and get everyone to follow. And
Yeah,
that's really hard.
it is. Right.
That's really hard.
It is challenging. Well, no doubt it's a challenging time for anybody, certainly a leader with the responsibility to influence a whole organization.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to keep chatting. I know we're closing in the end here. What would be advice that you might give, maybe to a leader right now? Any words that you've got people that are maybe in the middle of middle management or leading an
Yeah.
organization? What would you leave them with?
I would say take this time as an opportunity as much as you can to think about what you want now and next, and develop something while we have some time, and kind of think big picture right now. I think that's what's going to help when things settle, is to realize, what do I love, what do I want to do. I think a lot of people will be shifting around and getting to a different place in their career right now. If you were to ask your leaders, what can I do to help, now is the time to be asking that, and contribute in as big of a way as you can to what they care about. You will look so different in the back end of this than others who just put their heads down and are doing their thing, which is appropriate most of the time. But try and figure out a way that you can support the businesses, especially those who are struggling.
Mhm.
How could you do something different that's going to help them get through this?
That's a great point. I think that's great advice, and that also helps you grow as a person.
Right.
Just helps the businesses. But
And stay engaged through it. I think its hardest thing is that we're all, many people are just, doing the same thing day in and day out, and it's getting tiring being in our homes. So if we can create something new that's exciting, that stimulates us, it's going to
yeah,
help us with some of those more mundane things we all are working on.
yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yes.
this has been great. We've been with Jennifer Mackin, who's got a new book coming out on August 25th, Leaders Deserve Better, A Leadership Development Revolution. And if people want to get the book, how do they do it?
Yeah, any major retailer, Amazon.com, and love to get feedback. So please share with me, anybody who does read the book, please share with me your thoughts. I would love to hear them. And you can also find me at jennifermackin.com.
Great. We'll
So
put
Don,
that
we'll have to keep talking on the side now. We've got a lot more that we could discuss.
definitely for sure. And at some point, we'll have you back for another part two of this. That'd be great.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
Thank
thank you
you.
very much for joining us today, Jennifer.
Absolutely. Take
So
care.
thanks everybody for joining today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader. Of course, as always, keep liking, subscribe, make sure you share, and I've always appreciated your comments and your suggestions for future topics and future guests. Thanks for joining. Keep leading. Thanks, everybody.